written, I was just sort of trying to, the characters, you know, there's Matt Scudder, Bernie, Rodenbar, Keller, Edmund Tanner. There's a whole bunch of series characters. And I wondered, you know, I think in a way, I've read many of the different characters. I have my favorite, who I want to say. But it kind of has allowed you to, in some way, show off your ability to be the dark character, be the funny, amiable character, be the somewhat insane, insomniac character, you know, and all those things. I'm wondering, though, what attracted you to writing series from the beginning, and how that happened?
Well, only one of these series was designed to be a series. The only one that I knew before I wrote the first book that I was going to be writing more than one was the Matthew Scudder series that originated with a proposal that I developed that led to a contract for 3 books with Dell, 3 paperback originals. In other instances, it's simply been a case of having written a book and discovering that I liked writing that character and that it would be interesting to continue. And that was the case with Evan Tanner, the first character that I wrote more than one book about. It was the case with Bernie Rodenbar. That was the case with Chip Harrison. That's always been how series have happened for me. In fact, there was one series, I think of it as a series. I think of it as a 1-book series. A book called The Specialist. It turned out reasonably well. It was written in the late 60s. And I had it all planned. It was about a group of ex-Vietnam vets who were pulling capers in aid of truth, justice, and the American way. And it was all set up to be a series. And I gave the book to my agent, and he sold it to Knoxburger at Gold Medal. And I got a call from my agent, and he said, "When do you think you want to do the next book about these guys?" And I said, "Well, I'm not exactly sure, but I think probably never." I said, we'll never work with their publishing. And he said, "Well, why?" He said, I thought it was going to be a series. I said, "So did I." And I think the book turned out reasonably well. And it's a book that I would like to read, but it's not a book that I want to write. I didn't like the writing of it. And he said, "But I thought it was going to be a series." And he said this about 4 times. And I said, "Well, if it helps, we can think of it as a 1-book series." And I have copies of it on eBay, and I listed it as, the 1-book series because it was. So that's how that happens. As I said, of the series that have been intentional, there have been 2, and only 1 has led to a second book. So I don't know that I do series so that it allows me to write about different characters. If I just wanted that, I would just write the different, books about different people every time. I think I probably enjoy series for much the same reason that readers do, and series have always been extremely popular with readers. All the way back to Queen Elizabeth I, who talked Shakespeare talked into, when you're a monarch, I think you just express the desire when you're an absolute monarch. But she wanted another play about Falstaff. So Shakespeare wrote Merry Wives of Windsor in response. So there's always been this feeling that I think what drives series readership is I had a good experience. I'd like to have that same experience again, but for the first time. and that's what you generally get to one degree or another with series.
What do you find are the disadvantages for you as a writer, if there are any, to writing a serious character over a long period of time?
Well, I haven't found any disadvantages in that respect. I think sometimes the public's enthusiasm for a series will outlast the writers, and also sometimes one just goes stale on it, and I think every series has a natural stopping point, and most series go on about 2, sometimes 3 books past that point.
But so it's made me think, though, that maybe because we're talking about dying here, that Matt Scudder's been aging.
Yes.
Through the books.
Yes. He's aged in real time, which was a decision that sort of made itself, but it became clear to me that the level of realism in the series was such that he had to. In other series, Bernie Rodenbach stays the same unspecified age forever. That series has a different relationship with what we persisted calling reality. But I made that decision in respect to Scudder, and it does mean that it's about time not to write anymore.
How old is he now?
76, 77, somewhere in there.
It's going to be hard to chase down those.
Yeah.
But, a little bit. But see, I don't want him to go away, so I was thinking maybe, I don't know. I'm just thinking about all the things he can do at this age. That's,
Well, a whole book of a guy sitting in front of a television set is kind of tedious.
I was thinking of another series guy who does, but that's okay. But so going back, you said only Scudder was the only one that you conceived of as a series.
Yes.
And you did. And so the others were, you were thinking one-offs, you wanted to write about this character like you would any book, and then there was more you just wanted to say about them.
I know.
Okay. Yeah, all right. Okay. So my other thing is that, so you've written all of these books under your own name. Why then write books under a pseudonym? Which
Well,
you've done.
I've done it various ways, and early on, I don't know about you, but I find it very difficult to explain any of the decisions in any areas of my life that I did that many years ago. What the hell was I thinking?
You could make up something good.
Yeah, probably. Well, as in respect to pen names, and some books, certainly, I think the reason I used a pen name was I was trying to avoid building a following. There's no other explanation I can find for it. It was commercially unsound. But, I've been writing just under my own name for the past 35, 40 years, so.
Right. It's funny though, because one would think that writing under a pseudonym gives you a certain kind of freedom because you're not yourself, but
Yeah, but I have that freedom all the time.
to
It
not be
doesn't-
yourself.
Yes,
That's true. That's one of the reasons to be an
To do
any
this.
part in venture at all.
Yeah.
I know. I wanted to talk about process a little because I know something that I think is really interesting and unusual that you've done for a few of your books, which is to book a cruise to go on to finish writing a book. And I mean, how did that start? What's that?
Well, all that's not that much different from going to a writer's colony, except the place moves.
Well, no.
Really, what the hell's the difference? You have your room, you get up, you work in it. Meals are available all the time. It's even more convenient than Ragdale or Virginia. And
And you don't socialize. Because
I don't socialize when I'm eager.
That's not totally.
Oh, it's close.
No, so you go on, okay, so you go with a book that's in progress that you need to finish, and so therefore you book the cruise, or you go to, I mean, you know, there's the,
I've only done it, and I haven't written that much on ships. The burglar who counted the spoons, the most recent Bernie Rodenbauer book, that was written on a Holland America ship in the summer of 2013. And that just seemed easy. I found a cruise, a 35-day cruise, which I figured was about the time I was going to need. And it left from Boston and returned to Boston, so I could do all this without going near an airport, which is the way I prefer to live my life. And it worked fine.
somehow to me, I find it like such to me, I think it sounds like a really strange process, because I don't think it's like a floating art.
Sure it is. You go to Yaddo a lot, right?
Yeah, it stays, you know, it's right
What's
here.
the difference?
It's very quiet and private and scary and isolated and dark and gothic. It's not moving. I don't like the idea of them moving on the ocean.
Well, you're not a cruise guy to begin with, clearly.
No, I'm not.
Well,
Maybe that's it. Okay, we're
Well,
not
maybe if
talking
you
about
just
me.
stayed in port, you'd be delighted.
This is not talking about.
Okay, fine.
So when you're not,
He's gonna need Dramamine.
well, wait. So when you're not on a ship, what's your writing process like?
I don't write anything.
Well, you've only taken 2 cruises, so you have somebody writing those books for you?
No, that's it. No, it's always a version of that. It's just that the venue varies. In 2013, well, let me tell you about the new book.
Yeah. This is the girl with the deep blue eyes.
The Girl with the Deep Blue Eyes, which is a book I didn't plan on writing until almost before I sat down and wrote it. And I was on my way to JFK. My wife and I were in a cab heading to the airport because there's no way to take a train to Belgium. not if you start here, it's easy. You start in Holland. But so we're in that car, and shortly before that, about a couple of weeks before this was in May of last year, Borderline was published by Hard Case Crime. And it was a book I wrote in, I think, 1961 or 62 it came out. And it was done under a pen name, and not even a usual pen name of mine. And it got lost, and I always thought it got lost for a very good reason. But we found it, and Charles Ardai at Hard Case Crime was eager to do it. And I had to decide whether I wanted it back in print, and I made the decision. Whenever there's a decision that comes, I try and reduce it to 2 courses of action, and I try to pick the one that produces income. So I agreed. And it came out, and the reviews were remarkably good. Got a good PW, I think it got a good book list, it got a lot of, anyway.
Did you remember the book? Well,
I didn't remember it well, but I remembered that. And I felt the reviews were much better than it deserved. Certainly very extremely generous. And I was thinking about that, and I was certainly drawing that way. And I said to my wife in the cab, I said, you know, it might be fun to do a book like that again. Not specifically like the book, but one that's just sort of pulpy and fast-moving and direct, and I ran out of adjectives, conquered a little with my hand. And she said, yeah, that might be fun. And 15 seconds later, I said, I just got an idea. Just like that. And now, I must say this about ideas. they come around all the time, and most of them aren't very good, and most of them wither on the vine, and deservedly so. And at this stage in life, even ones that I recognize as good ideas and ideas that could be good books turn out to be something I think, well, that's nice, but I don't want to write it. But that didn't happen in this instance, and it stayed with me. And we were in Belgium for 2 weeks, and I found myself thinking about the notion. And not just thinking, but it began evolving the way ideas sometimes do. And that was in May. We came back to the States, to New York. I got online, looked at my schedule, booked an apartment in Philadelphia through Airbnb for the month of July, and went down there right after the 4th, and wrote the book. And a little over 3 weeks, something like that.
So
3 to 4 weeks.
how long had you been thinking about it before you sat down to write it?
Certainly not any more than 2 months.
And you wrote it in 3 weeks, is it?
3 or 4,
Pretty much.
yeah, somewhere. It went well.
No, I'm
But
glad.
that was the same, it was like being on a ship, except I had to go out and find a place to eat. No, it wasn't that different. I went down to Philadelphia. I have several friends in Philadelphia. I didn't call anybody. I didn't let anybody know I was there. I didn't see anybody, you know. It worked just fine.
So
That was the time for you to say something wonderful about it.
I was about to say something about the book that it was interesting. I didn't know you'd written a book, so what I would say so quickly.
Yeah.
But the book moves like that. I mean, I read it basically in one night, pretty much, and it has.
See, it took me so much longer to write it.
Yeah, but what about when somebody spends 5 years on a book and then someone reads it in the night and they tell you that and it's great, you want to be happy, but you'd like them to labor a little. This is something, well, you said a couple of things. You said that you wanted to write something like that other book that had a pulpy, fast feel, which this book really does,
Yes.
you know. And it's something, well, this is am I wrong in remembering or reading that you started your career writing erotica?
No, you're absolutely right.
I am right, okay. So let's talk about sex a little bit, because my first novel, my editor said to me I had a very intense sex scene, which I thought was important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, you know, crime fiction and sex, and I think we have to trim this out. So I hear that all the time, and yet the girl with the deep blue eyes has quite a lot of sex.
Yes.
Quite a lot of
Yes.
sex.
Be warned.
Maybe that's why it moves so, you know, quickly. But no, it's a very, yeah, it does. It has a lot of sex. And I think of not all of your books, but a lot of your books. I mean, one of the books that has stayed with me for years is Small Town, which is a really, I think it's a fantastic book, and it's a very complex book because it's about 9/11.
Yeah.
And it's also a book that is filled with sex.
Yeah.
And so let's get back to the sex question though. Like,
Okay.
if there is a question. But the thing is that you've broken that rule that I've heard many times about that you shouldn't really have much explicit sex in a crime
It
novel.
depends on the book. I think it very much depends on the book. In the Matthew Scudder books, he leads an active life, certainly, but the curtain is always drawn. He's very circumspect. It's a first-person narration. He never terribly descriptive or anything else when he gets lucky. And Bernie Rodenbauer in the most recent book, one whole chapter is just 3 asterisks.
It's the camera moving away.
That's Bernie Bernie being a gentleman. So it does depend to a degree.
What's the name of the book, which I read, about the woman who really dirty book? You know. You do know.
Oh, Getting Off.
Getting Off. Right. How could I forget that title? And that's a pulp book and a funny book. Do you not think it's a funny book?
I think it probably is. You know, one thing that it's impossible to tell when you write something is whether it's suspenseful or whether it's humorous. How do you know? I'm not that gripped by wondering how the scene will come out because I wrote it, you know, and so on. But yeah, I suppose it's amusing.
Well, it feels like that's part of the intent of that book. No? Or it just wrote itself in that sort of way, or
I don't know. I had an enormous amount of fun writing Getting Off.
it feels like that.
It's about a woman who takes great delight in going out, meeting men, picking them up, taking them home, going to bed with them, and then killing them. And she realizes that over the years she's missed five who survived, so she's got to go find them. That's her mission.
It's one of those cautionary
wipe
tales.
the slate thing, yes.
But it also, I'm not going to ruin it because then it has a sort of turnaround that makes you sorry you were laughing, but you know, which was kind of mean on your part. I thought. So okay, I wanted to. So you tend to, when you write, you don't have like a sort of scheduled thing. Like so many people who come here will say, well, I write every morning, and then I do this, and then I write for 2 hours an hour. But you will go off and.
When I'm secluded that way, that's really how I write these things. For quite a few years now, that's how it works. I write every day, and I don't do anything else until the day's work is done.
And do you do much rewriting, even when you're moving that quickly in a book?
No, I'll touch things up as I'm going along, but when I finally type the end, I generally mean it. Yeah.
I like that idea.